Hi, my name is Trevor Ulrich. Our group project will be focusing on the life and virtues of St. Francis of Assisi. Sam Ducey, Cameron Newton, and I will discuss certain aspects of his life along with different stories that affected his path towards God and salvation.
So here's the summary of the Wolf of Gubbio story. So essentially there was a wolf that was terrorizing the city of Gubbio where Francis of Assisi was staying at the time. And the inhabitants of the city were so scared that they wouldn't go beyond the city walls, and they would wear armor and carry weapons. And so one day, Francis was so sympathetic to the people of Gubbio that he made his way to the spot where the wolf was while making the sign of the cross, and he put his faith in God. And as the wolf charged at Francis, he made the sign of the cross once more and called the wolf brother and commanded him not to harm anyone else. And so the wolf stopped and laid at the feet of Francis of Assisi. Then he told the wolf that he would make peace between it and the people of the city, and that the wolf itself will be forgiven for its past offenses. And he makes a pact with the wolf that says if the wolf doesn't harm any other human or animal, Francis will make sure that it is always fed. And what he's pointing out there is that the reason the wolf is attacking is because it is hungry. And so they essentially shake hands, the best you can with the wolf. And the wolf followed Francis to the village where the people saw the miracle that Francis had done. And seeing that the wolf was no longer violent because it wasn't hungry, they promised that they would feed the wolf for all time in place of Francis. And so then the story of the leper. So one day, while Francis was praying, he heard God talking to him, and that God told him that he should think the opposite of everything he thinks. So, for example, everything that delights him, he must find bitter. Everything that he loved, he must now hate, and vice versa. Everything he hates, he must now love. So, a few days after this, he was riding his horse outside of his hometown of Assisi, and he saw a leper, and previous to hearing God's voice, he would have been disgusted and just left. But because of the drastic change in thought, he decided to stop and help. So he dismounted, and he gave the leper a coin, and he kissed the leper on the hand. And there's no confirmation of this, there's no way you can confirm this, but there are some images that suggest that the leper Francis met was actually Jesus because of the wounds on the hands. And then a week or so after that, Francis made his way to a hospice of lepers, and when he arrived, he called them all together to him, and he gave each of them a kiss on the hand, and he gave them alms. And it was at this point that Francis had become a true servant of God, because he was no longer bitter towards the lepers, or anyone for that matter. And in the past, he wouldn't even look at these people, but now he is going to their homes to help them. And he writes that when he was staying among them, he was serving them with the most humility.
St. Francis was born in 1182 in the city of Assisi, which is located in what is now modern-day Italy. At the time, Assisi was part of the Holy Roman Empire. Francis' father was a wealthy cloth merchant who wanted Francis to become a successful businessman. As a child, St. Francis grew up educated in Latin and French. Throughout his youth, it is speculated that St. Francis was drawn to war and combat, seeing it as a heroic and chivalrous action. When St. Francis was in his late teens and early 20s, he went off to war against the neighboring city of Perugia, which is approximately 40 miles away from Assisi. St. Francis was captured by Perugian forces and was held as a prisoner of war for approximately 1 year. During this time, he most likely experienced a large amount of trauma that stuck with him throughout his life. This time of his life was most likely what led to his emphasis on nonviolence and peace. After a year of captivity, St. Francis was freed with a ransom and returned to Assisi. It was at this time that he began his spiritual conversion. Instead of following his father as a merchant, St. Francis instead was drawn towards a life of service towards God and to the poor. He found it meaningful to help those outcasts within his community, such as lepers and the poor. He can be depicted in many paintings by holding sick or disabled people with love and with care. St. Francis began to see the positives of poverty and helping the poor, and, along with the help of St. Clare, founded the Order of the Friars Minor, or the Franciscan Order, in 1209. This communal order included men and women, and the order quickly gained popularity, growing to thousands of people within the community during St. Francis' lifetime. This community wore brown habits, which signified the simplicity of the order and their devotion towards the poor.
St. Francis demonstrated Jesus' main teachings in many different ways, but I will point out probably the most known ways that he expressed Jesus' main teachings. First, I want to talk about faith. St. Francis showed faith in God by when he went to go fight with crusades. He had nice horse armor, beautiful horses, and lots of fancy swords. God called him and asked him to come back home, and Saint Francis did God's will. And he was mocked and he was teased, but he showed faith in God. He detached from his wealthy items, and he endured teasing and mocking, all because he had faith in God. St. Francis demonstrated love in many ways, but one story I'd like to point out is when he was riding his nice horse. And remember, St. Francis was a very clean person. He was very wealthy. He had lots of nice armor, nice horses, nice clothing. But he saw a dirty leper on the side of the road. And most people today walk by homeless people. Some people would hold their breath, try not to catch diseases. But St. Francis was different. St. Francis had love. St. Francis got down from his horse and he gave that leper a kiss. He gave the leper a kiss because St. Francis had so much love for the poor, the sick, and the injured. Later in his life, St. Francis showed huge examples of detachment from wealth. Remember, he had grown up in a very wealthy family, wealthy things. He was addicted to materialistic pleasures, just like St. Ignatius was. But God talked to St. Francis one day, and he told him to rebuild his church. And St. Francis gave his family back all the inheritance he had from his dad, all the money, all the possessions, and his father was angry at this. And St. Francis told him, I detach myself from all this wealth, from all this money. I give you back everything you've given me. I'm here to serve the Lord. That's how determined he was to change his life. Lastly, St. Francis showed tremendous amounts of empathy and understanding. One story I'd like to point out is a wolf in his town would go around killing people, and it was a very evil animal. And all the townspeople wanted to kill this wolf. But St. Francis said, no, I'm not going to hurt this wolf. And he went out there, and the story tells that he talked with the wolf, and the wolf understood what he was saying through the power of God. And the wolf no longer attacked people, and he actually became the town pet, and everyone started loving him. He changed that wolf's life because he had empathy and love. He understood like Jesus did, which most people aren't able to do. St. Francis is easily one of the best examples for Jesus' main teachings. He showed love, empathy, understanding, detachment from wealth, and prayed all the time. He came from a family of wealth and materialism, and he threw it all away because of God. God talked to him. He was able to perform miracles, to understand, to be truly happy, not fake happiness from money and clothes and shiny armor. He knew what true happiness was. He experienced wealth, and he showed that you can change through God.